The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
It must be the NBA season if I have no idea what day of the week it is. And I don't. A happy whatever day it is, folks. I think it's Wednesday. Wait a minute. Let me look at this clock here. Yeah, Wednesday. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. I am Dan Besbris, your gracious host, at Dan Besbris on Twitter. I think most of you know that already. Coming up on today's program, we got Seth Klein, Seth the Sportsman. We're going to talk about some stuff from the first week of the fantasy basketball season with Seth, get into kind of I think the theme of this week is reality or mirage. That's the stuff right now. Injuries, obviously a big thing at the moment. Kris Dunn being out of the blue. We didn't see that coming. John Collins being shelved for longer than most people expected. And then, yeah, it's going to be, mirage or oasis kind of thing. You're wandering through the fantasy desert. You stumble upon what you think is the image of a pool. Is it a pool or is it just sand and your brain's gone haywire? We did a little bit of that with Alex on Monday's show. We'll do a little bit more of that today with Seth. Obviously, we're going to talk about what happened on Tuesday night. Storylines. We're not doing a box score breakdown on this podcast anymore. That is for a show called The Box Score Breakdown. You've heard me promo that thing daily here for the better part of a week. I'm going to keep doing it so long as folks are continuing to find it. It's called The Box Score Breakdown. You can Google search it, Box Score Breakdown, and it'll usually come up. You'll see Box Score Breakdown by Hoopball when you search for that. You can also find it on Twitter by following at Hoopball Fantasy, or my two former co-hosts here on Fantasy NBA Today, Adrian Benjamins and at Ball with Neil are their two Twitter handles. Those shows come out right at the end of the action every night. So as the games end, and then you get a show. You don't have to read through all the box scores yourself. You can just listen to two awesome dudes talk about it with energy and enthusiasm. You get the knowledge without having to peruse, without having to go to 14 different Yahoo box score pages and pause a bunch of autoplay crap. Just have a pod do it for you. It's awesome. I love it. I'm so excited about the effort that these guys are putting into that show. I mentioned on yesterday's podcast, the thing that touches me the most in my fantasy heart is the fact that they record half the show when the first wave of games ends and half when the second wave ends to speed up the release of the podcast, to basically get that out to you guys a half an hour sooner. Do you know what a pain in the ass it is to record half a show and then take a 2-hour break and then record another half of a show when you could just sit down and do the whole thing? It's a huge pain, but they're doing it for you guys. So go check that out, Box Score Breakdown. The order of operation for today's things, I want to take just a quick look at the storylines from yesterday. Then we'll talk to Seth, and then we'll get into what's coming up on Big Wednesday here. Nice Wednesday card coming up on this fine 24th of October. A full week and now a day into the NBA season. It is a massive one today. I believe we got 11 games on the docket. So they're all playing. Might be 12 even. Somebody count me on that. No, it's 11. Double checking myself. 11 games. So a lot of things to look forward to tonight. And we will assign some homework. That's what we do here on this thing. Hoping to get Benny Aziz on the show for tomorrow. Good buddy here in the fantasy and reality landscape. Talk a little bit about 30 deep and a little bit more on the Oasis Mirage thing going on this first week of the season. That's our hope for tomorrow's podcast. We'll talk about that in a minute. First things first, what happened on Tuesday night from a storyline perspective? Again, we're not breaking down all of the box scores, but we will pull things out from a lot of the games. Some of the teams will get their 5 seconds in the sun. Blake Griffin, storyline from Tuesday night, went for 50, 5-0, and somehow made only 5 out of 11 free throws on his way to 50 points. It's rare that a guy scores 50 on a 3-game card and is the third best fantasy night, but so it goes when you miss a bunch of free shots, as the great Hubie Brown would call them. This is a prominent sell high moment for Blake Griffin. I know what you're saying out there. What's to stop him from actually having just a good season? His body. Guys, Blake Griffin will break down. I don't much care for his fantasy game in general. He's very popcorny. Points, rebounds, assists tend to be the go-to, and he shot the ball really well in this game, which is the last year and change or so has been kind of unusual for him. The turnovers were also very low. A lot of the things that happened here were not sustainable. Free throws, by the way, being too low for a man who's sitting much closer to mid-70s these days. The 5 3-pointers, he's taking a lot of threes. He's not going to make 5 every night. In fact, it's going to sink his free throw percentage, or his field goal percentage, I should say, more often than you see these 57%ers. So sell high. If you got Blake Griffin in the 50 range this year, see if you can spin him for a top 30, top 35 guy right now while he's playing well and while he's healthy, before it all comes apart. No Ben Simmons over on the Philadelphia side, so you got a little bit more production out of most of the guys. Good to see Joel Embiid limiting his turnovers here in the early going, but no real surprises over there. The other thing I wanted to mention from that ball game, the other guys on the Detroit Pistons starting to show signs of life, and it's not Stanley Johnson. It probably never will be. Remember a couple of years ago, some of the other big sites out there went totally bonkers for Stanley Johnson. This was before hoop ball existed, frankly. So can't talk about whatever the heck I was doing. I was calling minor league baseball games at that. But I remember everybody was like, Stanley Johnson, the second coming here. And he's just a nothing fantasy player. He's a zero usage guy. However, Reggie Bullock looks good. He played 41 minutes in this overtime game. So he was on pace for 36 in a standard contest. 17 points, 2 boards, 3 assists, 2 3-pointers, and no bad stuff. So he didn't really help you in this one. It wasn't a great game, no steals, but no turnovers. Shot the ball well enough, made all 3 of his free throws. Reggie Jackson is shooting the ball well in the early going, although he's another guy that doesn't get you much on the defensive side. The thing that jumps out was Ish Smith. And obviously, they're not going to score 133 points every night, but Ish Smith had 21 and 3 off the bench on 9 out of 12 shooting. And he's always a relatively decent field goal percentage guy because he doesn't shoot very much. He's mostly slashing and cutting towards the rim. I'm not sure I'm in full buy mode on Ish, but it does seem like they want to get him about 27 to 29 minutes a night. And if he ends up as one of the 4 facilitators on this team, because they work the offense through Drummond, through Blake, through Reggie Jackson, and sometimes through Ish, if he's going to get you 4 to 5 assists and a steal on okay percentages, he might actually work his way onto your roster. So put a little asterisk next to Ish Smith. Keep an eye on him to see if this is something sustainable. I'm seeing him getting picked up in a handful of my leagues, not all of them, but he might be coming off the waiver wire soon, so throw him on the watch list. Clippers, there's a storyline to be had, and that storyline is Patrick Beverley, who busted out after a couple of slow ones with a near triple-double, 12 points, 10 boards, 8 assists. He did not have any steals or blocks in this game, which is a pisser for a guy on his way to almost a triple-double in 27 minutes. The minutes are slowly creeping up for Pat Bev. This was despite 5 fouls. As I've said on this show before, he is a hold. Avery Bradley, very much a drop. He just doesn't do anything when he's on the floor. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I know that there's a lot of hype around him right now. I just don't think he's going to be playing enough minutes or having the high enough usage rate to make those minutes count. I like his game. He's an interesting player, but the Clippers are going to have to get rid of Patrick Beverley and Lou Williams and Avery Bradley to really clear things out. Montrezl Harrell is the other story from this one. Remember you guys all picked up Boban? Tried to warn you, it's just Denver. Next time Clippers are going to play the Nuggets, pick up Boban. He's going to go crazy. He always does. But it's Montrez right now. Montrezl Harrell is the lead dog at center. Marcin Gortat did not play well in this ball game. Trez, as they call him, had a solid game. 12 points, 6 boards, 2 steals, 2 blocks. He made both of his free throws. If he can make his free throws, he should probably be rostered. I just worry that the bottom is going to fall out on that at some point. He's going to have one of those games where he goes to the line 9 times and makes 3 of them, and it's going to crush you. But he's an interesting fantasy player. He's a very high field goal percentage guy. He's going to get you some points. Not a ton, but enough to sort of hang on and he's such a high energy dude, he'll probably get you a steal or a block or one of each when he's out there for 23 to 25 minutes. So he's, right now for me, he's kind of teetering on the brink. Depending on your team build, I think he might make more or less sense for you. My teams this year, I ended up drafting teams that are really good at free throw shooting. And so, a guy like Montrezl Harrell, if I were to pick him up, it would probably be mostly as a trade chip, because I'm just afraid that one of these games is going to be the one where he torpedoes a category for me. But he's interesting, and he's probably worth being rostered in most leagues. I'm guessing in almost every 12-team league, there's a team that can use his type of services without fear of the free throw stuff. The Denver thing we were watching was, could Trey Lyles do a little bit more with his time on the floor? He did a little bit more, but it still wasn't great. 12-5 with a block, 4 turnovers. I don't even know where that came from. This was a garbage time game for sure. The Denver starters, nobody played more than 25? No, Gary Harris hit 26 minutes in that one. And so on the Sacramento side, which was the side we were really watching in this ball game, things got real ugly real quick. De'Aaron Fox had a bad one. Buddy Hield had a bad one. Nemanja Bjelica, who people were keeping an eye on, had a bad one. Willie Cauley-Stein had a meh game, not terrible. And then you got all these bench guys. Justin Jackson had a big ball game. Frank Mason III had a relatively large ball game. And Marvin Bagley had 5 blocks in a garbage time special. I do think he should be owned. I saw him get dropped after the low minutes right out of the chute. Everybody went nuts after one ball game. I don't have the confidence to put him in my lineup just yet, but I did pick him up in leagues where he was dropped, and I'm sitting on him for a little bit. Despite my no kings allowed policy, it does feel like the narrative there suggests he needs to be playing 27 or more minutes every night. And if that's the case on a bad team that's trying to run like crazy, there's probably going to be enough stats out there, even if he kind of sucks on his way to getting them. Which was sort of what happened last night. Like, he didn't make his free throws. He turned the ball over a bunch of times. But hell, 20-9 with 5 blocks, you're not throwing that back into the pond. That's a fish you're keeping. Bogdan, what happens when he comes back? He's probably going to be a guy worth owning as well, just because of this, the high pace. But if they're getting blown out, then things get thrown all asunder. As I've said, I'm thinking about taking the no kings allowed sign off my treehouse. But after this one, seeing all the starters just get ruined in a blowout, I think this could happen from time to time on a really bad team. So you got to pick your spots. I do think De'Aaron Fox is worth owning going forward. It seems like in general, he's going to be well enough. But you guys know my stance on Kings for the most part. I'm not going to do anything rash or quick with this team. They're going to really have to prove it. So the topic this first week, well, after 1 week, I should say, as I've mentioned before, is really kind of a what's real and what's a mirage. And I think we all see things ever so slightly differently from one another. And so it's important to pick the brains of those that are also watching the same stuff and seeing what we're seeing. And we can go a little bit deeper. And for that, we have one of my good buddies back on the show, Seth Klein, at Seth the Sportsman on Twitter. Seth, welcome back, my man.
I'm glad to be back.
So we're 1 week in. Slightly more than that, but whatever. Who's counting? Some weird things going on in the NBA, some less weird things. I have a couple topics to discuss with you. One is, as I just mentioned, kind of this what's a mirage and what's real. And the other is a couple of kind of, I don't want to say necessarily out of nowhere type injuries, but ones that are seemingly more severe than we all realized. And that's Kris Dunn, who appeared to hurt his knee in his one game back after missing a couple days on paternity. And then John Collins, who we heard was dealing with some ankle stuff and would miss the very beginning of the season, and now suddenly it sounds like it might be multiple weeks beyond that. How do you is there something that you might do differently going forward with guys like this, or is this just sort of luck of the draw kind of thing? Like, what can we do?
Not a lot to do There's not a lot you can do right now. It's too early. I think trying to trade any of these players isn't going to get you great value. And, if it's a type of injury that happens mid-season and they say, hey, this is going to keep him out 2 months, then it's an easy decision whether you need to drop him or not. But Right now, it's tough. I mean, it depends on the league, I guess. I mean, I've seen Dunn dropped in 2 of my leagues, but without an IR spot, so I kind of understand. Like, all right, are you going to wait 3-4 guys on your bench? Can you wait 6 weeks, 8 weeks for him to come back? And is he worth that much? And I might have dropped him too, because it's not like the prognosis is 2 to 6 weeks where, okay, if he's back on the really short end, he could be back by mid-November. But the longer prognoses, I don't know. Yeah, those are tough. Collins, I'm more optimistic on because there seems to be a little bit more of a definite timeline. But again, it's tough. But those are also the risks. I mean, Collins, those of you who drafted right up until the the start of the season, you knew he was hurt. So that's a risk you took. Same thing with Markkanen and guys like that, Cousins. Like you understand, you have to. You're not drafting these guys if you're not willing to ride it out a little bit. The Dunn one's tough. There's nothing you can do. The Barton one, there's nothing you can do. But
yeah, Barton too. Good call on that one. For me personally, and I'm curious your take on this, because when we talked about draft strategy, I don't think this really came up much. And that is the idea of stashing somebody. I've basically abandoned stashing injured players, and I think I'm in the minority on that. But what I've found is when I stash a guy who I know is hurt, I'm almost always disappointed by how long it takes for them to get back. It almost always seems like it takes longer than the initial expectation. And usually someone else on my team gets hurt during that window, and then I want to put that guy in the injured spot that's already occupied by my stash dude. So I've sort of emotionally prepared myself to just not have any stash guys coming back mid-season. What's your stance on drafting guys that are hurt at the start of the year?
It's mixed, and I think a lot of it has to do with how good that player can be when they do return and how long they're going to be out and where you're getting them in the draft. I think that all those factors make a difference. For instance, I drafted Boogie Cousins on, I think I have him on like 4 or 5 teams, because I feel like even if he doesn't come back till December or January, for the 2 or 3 months he is back, and this is even with sitting out back-to-backs or whatever. I mean, the guy could play 20 minutes a game. At 20 minutes a game, he can be a top 30, 45 player. So for me, that's worth it. Especially in Roto, where I don't need him to play every night like I would in a head-to-head. I don't have him in any head-to-heads. With Markkanen too. Markkanen, I got really good value on him in 2 or 3 leagues. Like he was falling. I think I have him in our league too. I think he in the
Seth and I are in a 12-team Roto league together. By the way, we should put that out there.
Yeah, and I think I ended up getting him in like the 9th or 10th round, or maybe the 8th round. And for me at that point, I was like thinking, okay, yeah, he may be out a month or 2, but when he comes back, is anybody that I'm drafting from that point on going to be better than him? And it's not like a knee injury or Achilles. Yeah, certainly an elbow injury isn't good, but it's not maybe an elbow injury like if you were a pitcher in baseball or a quarterback. It might take some time for him to get his shot back, but I don't think he's going to have trouble getting rebounds and eventually shooting the ball well. And I just felt at that point, as well as in the other leagues where I drafted him, that the value was too good there. There wasn't anybody else. I wasn't going to be like, oh, Thad Young, man, he's going to be great at that point. No, probably not. Markkanen, we've seen he could be a top 50 guy, top 60 guy. So I felt it was worth it at that point. But a lot of it has to do with where you get him. Would I have taken him in the 4th round? No. Would I have taken him if it was a much more gruesome injury? Probably not. It just depends, I think. But it is tough. Having an IR spot certainly helps. It's so much harder to draft guys like that when you don't, or if you don't have that extra bench spot. I know in our league we have the extra bench spot, so for me, I actually have Boogie and I think I have Boogie and
you do. Yeah. I looked at it while you were talking. You have both of those guys.
Yeah. So, I kind of looked and I was like, all right, it's Roto. I was happy with Harden, Butler, and Kevin Love, and Vucevic, or however. I don't know. I'm bad at pronouncing names, but
I think that was right.
I think I got those 4 guys with my top 4 picks. So I was thinking, okay, I have 4 all-stars right there. Hey, why not take a swing on Boogie or Marketing later on, because I felt I could fill out the rest of my roster until then, which my team's not doing good so far, but I think I've been able to, I'm happy with my roster so far.
Yeah, and obviously we're, 8 days into the season,
Sure.
so things are not exactly set in stone yet, and Jimmy Butler is playing like a man possessed, so I think that'll probably turn out okay. That actually gives me a good segue into one of the other things I wanted to ask about on today's pod, which is sort of what's real and what's not, especially at the top of the draft. We're seeing a lot of early round picks wildly underperforming. We're seeing some mid-tier guys going totally bananas here to start the year. And I just want to know what's real and what's not. And I realize also that the answer is not always quite so black and white, where it's like, hey, Victor Oladipo is number 163 in 9 category format. And the answer is not going to be, okay, well, either he's the number 9 guy or he's the number 160 guy. There's a world where it could be somewhere in between that, but just a couple of these big-name guys. Giannis Antetokounmpo, who, 8 cat, obviously much higher than 9 cat right now, thanks to his 6 turnovers per game. Victor Oladipo, off to a slow start. Also, free throw issues suddenly there. Seem like they should sort themselves out. Donovan Mitchell, Kyrie Irving, Drew Holiday. These are all guys drafted inside the top 20 in most leagues that are having an awful time the first 8 days. Seth, where do these guys end up as we move towards the middle parts of the year? And are there opportunities here for a potential buy low?
Yeah, there's always a potential for buy low with those guys if you find the right owner. It's not easy. I mean, people aren't going to be dumb this time of year, and there's a percentage of, a large percentage of owners who get super impatient early. And I see it from the questions people ask me on Twitter. Should I drop? I got one. It was like, should I drop Saric, our friend Saric, Dario Saric?
Yeah,
Saric.
Also the coupon code, by the way.
yeah. I hope that hasn't expired.
It has not.
But yeah, I literally, so the opening night was 2 games, I think there was that first night.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a bad game. And I'm not saying as a world beater guy, he's not going to win you your league, but someone was like, time to drop Saric? Like, what do you mean time to drop him? Like, first of all, I hate that lead in when people ask me that, on time to drop this player, or like, I don't know, like, what's your timeline? I don't know what your team is, or who's in your league, or what players are available, or what the settings are, or anything. It's just like, time to drop this player that you picked in the 7th round yesterday. I don't know. So people get crazy impatient. I see it more than anything in fantasy basketball, more than fantasy baseball is about second than fantasy football for me in that regard. But it's like insane, because I think a lot of it's because you can have a random player just blow up one night.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a Rodney Magruder type guy. Yeah, okay, he had a couple good games, but Rodney Magruder has a double-double. Should I time to drop Saric? Time to drop Augustin? Time to drop this player, Collison, whoever? Like, okay, there's been 2 games. Wayne Ellington's been out. James Johnson's been out. Like, what are you even looking at the variables when you want to pick up a player that wasn't in the rotation for the last 2 years? Like, you just have to look at that kind of stuff and not look at, wow, he had 1 good game. Why did he have that good game?
Yeah, it's definitely sort of the deep breath time of year right now. This is deep
but
breathing.
People
exercise.
overreact to box scores, and that's what it is, or a game where there might have been a lot of factors. There's been a few games this year where teams were getting blown out, and so their 10th guy off the bench was playing 25 minutes and maybe had a good game in garbage time, and then everyone wants to pick up Iman Shumpert. Like, Come on. Like, this dude's been in the league for 8-9 years. We know Iman Shumpert isn't a good basketball player. Like, at the very least, okay, he's a good defender, but we know for a fact he cannot produce for fantasy teams. And I'm getting questions like, should I drop my fifth best player for Iman Shumpert or for PJ Tucker after he hit 7 3-pointers in one game? Like, come on. Like, these guys have been in the league. PJ Tucker's been in the league for like 13 years.
Yeah, it's like 35 years, it feels like.
Yeah, well, because he played in like Russia or something for 7 years in between, something like that. But I think he was drafted in like 2007. I don't know, but he's been around for a long time, and you should know, anyone playing fantasy, unless it's your first year playing fantasy basketball, you should know better than to ask questions like that. And if you do, if you want to drop add PJ Tucker, and should I add PJ Tucker and drop
Rob Covington is the one I get a lot. There's a lot of like, should I drop Rob Covington after one slow game?
No,
it's brutal. That's a brutal one.
Yeah, that's bad. That I hear, but of course, every year that starts, and then by February he's a top 30 player, and everyone's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have dropped Rob Covington." Like, well, told you not to, but you like to go off a first month or first 10 game sample size. But yeah, I mean, if you want to drop Kentavious Caldwell Pope for PJ Tucker, don't even ask me. Just do it. But don't be dropping guys that you drafted early in at least in the first 10 rounds because of one guy that had one good game on one night.
You are, by the way, you're very close to correct. PJ Tucker did play 5 years abroad. Israel, Ukraine, Greece, Italy, and Germany. He knocked out all of those places, but not Russia. So I'm giving you half credit.
Ukraine was Russia like 20 years ago.
you get 60% credit on that one. So what about those guys up at the top then? Like, do you think you could potentially pry someone of that ilk away? Would you even want to? Like, is there a possibility that any of these guys that have gotten off to kind of slow starts in the top 20 don't quite hit their ADP? Like, is there a universe where Giannis is the number 9 guy instead of number 4 or 5? Or could Oladipo be a top 20 guy instead of a top 10 guy this year? Do we have to make any adjustments after 8 days, or is this just a massive blip and these guys are all going to end up basically where we expected they would be?
I think that for the guys we expect to be in the top 20, I don't see many of those guys really falling far, or not even, Oladipo is going to be better than he's been. Will he be top 10 again? I mean, I don't know. I mean, he wasn't a guy I was reaching for in the top 10, but will he be top 20? Probably. Is there a big difference between the number 9 ranked player and the number 17th ranked player? No. So the little differences in a 1 percentage point free throw or 0.2 less steals, like that's when people look at rankings, or like, everyone likes to look at rankings, and I'm one of them too, just to get a gauge on how guys are doing. Like, that makes a big difference between if a guy's shooting 48% from the field and he drops down to 46.5, that might drop him 15 spots in the rankings, like in the overall rankings, if he is a guy that's been boosted by the field goal percentage. So I try not to go crazy about that, but like, okay, Markieff Morris isn't going to be the number 19th ranked player. DeAndre Jordan isn't going to shoot
90%
from the line, So like, these things are going to change. No one's played more than 4 games. Can Zach LaVine finish in the top 25? Yeah, he could. I could see that. I could see the volume scoring continuing to be there. He's a good shooter from the free throw line. He hits threes, gets steals. Like, yeah, he could be. And will he be top 15? Probably not. But so I could see that staying there. But I do expect most of the guys that you drafted in the first 2 rounds to probably finish within the first 3 rounds. You're not going to see unless there's an injury, you're not going to see any of those guys fall off to like the 5th or 6th round, in my opinion.
Would you offer? Let's play a little hypothetical game, and I asked a couple guys this on a different podcast where I was guesting on it. Among those names that I just threw out there, because to me those are the biggest name guys that are underproducing right now. Would you offer your pick from a round behind where they were drafted? Like, would you give your 3rd round pick for Kyrie Irving, or would you give your 2nd round pick for Victor Oladipo right now, just without even thinking about it, or does it require more analysis than that?
Maybe a little more analysis. Like, straight up, it depends. Kyrie Irving, probably not. He was a guy that I think I have him in like one team because I wasn't really liking his spot this year. But Oladipo, yeah, I mean, if I had, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a guy. If I had like Rosen, maybe, yeah, I'd offer him for Oladipo. I mean, I don't know if there's going to be a huge difference there at the end of the year, but it can't hurt. I don't see DeRozan finishing 20 spots ahead of Oladipo. Maybe you can get a second player, like a 2-for-1 thrown in. A guy like Karl Anthony Towns, yeah, sure. I would, in a heartbeat, offer my 2nd rounder for him. But someone said to me the other day, and this is like crazy reactionary. Someone asked me, they said, this was like before his last game, Towns, where he finally had a good game. He said, what would you sell Towns for? I have Towns, and he's been a bust so far. Do you think he can? You think he'll ever be good again? And I'm just like,
what?
I thought for a second, like, is this a joke? You know, he's been a bust after 2 games, and will one of the best players in the NBA ever be good again at age 23? And I'm just like, yeah. I was like, delete this tweet right now, because you don't want anyone else to see this, because it's embarrassing.
Yeah, that's a bad take right there. It's funny too when you look at it, and I didn't even throw Towns into this mix, and maybe I should have, because he did have that crazy quiet, foul trouble-ridden first game. His second game didn't blow the roof off the building, but he did have 4 blocks in that one. After all of this mess, whatever you want to call it, 4 games into the season, he's actually still number 29 in 9 category format. So like all of this disastrous stuff that everybody's talking about, and he's inside the top 30. This is the worst case scenario for him. But maybe I should have included him in that, because I did see some reactions. I think I saw a tweet where someone was like, hey, would you just unload Towns for like Rudy Gobert right now? I'm like, no, what are you doing? Like, this is a guy you probably spent the 2nd or 3rd pick on in your league. He's durable. He's the rare big man who can contribute in almost every category without hurting you anywhere. Maybe you could buy low. Like, maybe I should be offering Damian Lillard for Karl Anthony Towns in a couple of leagues. That's something that I would do in a heartbeat if I could upgrade to Cat and get a guy that can be inside that top 3 for someone who, mind you, off to a decent start. Lillard is always going to be in that like 7 to 13 range. I would make that move quickly. Is that something you would do also? Are there other guys you might think about throwing out that are in that turn area off to good starts that maybe you could pry a Towns away from somebody? Like a Kawhi, or I don't know.
I mean, yeah, Kawhi maybe, but I would want, like, I don't know if that even makes sense. Like, I don't know if it's, and not that I do think that Towns is better overall than Kawhi, but like, is that worth it I don't know. Not that I'm worried about Towns or anything. In fact, I'd be more worried about Kawhi, but I don't know. I don't know if that, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, why not?
Yeah. I think you're early enough in the season too.
Like, am I going to really spend the time like negotiating this deal with somebody and this, when probably just happy with Kawhi anyway, something like that, I don't know. But but maybe someone a little lower. Yeah. Like a Chris Paul or like Bradley Beal or Drew Holiday, someone in that range, although he's been pretty bad himself. So probably not getting Towns for him. But
what about Paul George? Would he make the list? Would you upgrade Paul George?
Yeah, I would definitely trade Paul George for Towns.
All right. Very good. Seth, any other thoughts on the first 8 days before I let you get back to your day? Oh, and how was Target, by the way?
Target was good. I went to Target to get 3 things. I needed a shirt, a black long sleeve shirt for my daughter they're doing some Halloween dress up at her school. And so I needed to buy a black long sleeve shirt for her. The second thing I needed was a light bulb, a bulb for my right-hand turn signal in my car. So I got the black shirt. They didn't have the bulb. And then when I left, I had spent $206.
Oh, man. Oh, wonderful time. I try to do almost everything online these days if I can. It's just sorry, brick and mortar. I know sometimes you just got to go to like for a shirt. Yeah, you want to try that thing on, but hopefully you didn't have to stress out too much about it. Seth, can we do this again soon?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Nice. Seth Klein. By the way, the coupon code still Sharich, SARIC. You can get $3 off the in-season premium membership at Hoopball. It's good on that as well. He is at Seth Da Sportsman on Twitter. My guy, Seth, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
That was my good buddy, my fellow Angelino, who actually roots for New York sports teams, the great Seth Klein. Back on the pod, and hopefully, last year we had him on quite often. We can do that again this season. It's always fun talking to Seth, and good luck to him with the future trips to Target. Quickly here, what do we got coming up this evening? It is a big Wednesday on the docket, as I mentioned earlier on the podcast. We got 11 games coming up tonight. I'll look at it from the gambling perspective, and then we'll talk about what we're watching on the fantasy side. Dallas is in Atlanta. The Mavericks favored by 1.5 on the road against a very bad Atlanta team. But this line, to me, feels relatively accurate. Dallas has overperformed against some teams that are dealing with stuff, and Atlanta is a team that has underperformed because they're just not very good, but nobody's that bad. And then they actually played pretty well in their last ballgame. Trae Young went nuts. Cleveland by 3 at home over the Brooklyn Nets. Cavs are really starting to need that first home win. Sounds like they want to go to the veterans a little bit more. This, I believe, also is a pretty accurate line for a weird ball game. Two teams trying to figure out who they are. Miami, 8-point home favorites over the Knicks. If guys are really coming back for the Heat, I would lean New York in this ball game. To me, they're a ball club that's overperforming right now and worth riding. I think Miami is overrated this year. They might cover this line, but that's certainly not the side I would take. Toronto, 8-point home favorites against the Minnesota Timberwolves. If Jimmy Butler's playing, I think this should be a pretty good ball game. Toronto looks awesome here right out of the chute, but that's a lot of points. No real strong feelings on this ball game. Houston by 2 at home against the Utah Jazz. I think that's, without Chris Paul, I think you're going to see a lot of money actually come in on the Utah side, but they actually look a little bit disjointed to start the season as well. Ever so slightly into the Houston Rockets. Charlotte by 4.5 in Chicago. I got to lean Hornets on this one. I know it's a lot of points to lay, but Chicago looks bad. Like real bad. And I think the Hornets are going to be okay this season. They're still kind of figuring things out a bit as well. San Antonio by 1.5 at home against the Indiana Pacers. This line looks pretty good. Slight lean to San Antonio. Milwaukee by 6. Philly is on a back-to-back in this one. No strong feelings there. Memphis by 3 on the road in Sacramento. Sacramento is on a back-to-back. I look for them to bounce back in this ball game. I think this will be a pretty tight one, but of course 3 points is not much for either team to clear. Lakers by 4.5 in Phoenix. I lean Suns, actually, in this ball. I think the Lakers win this game, but I think it's going to be a track meet for a while, and then it's just going to be LeBron against a bad team at the end. And Warriors by 9.5 against the Wizards. A slight lean actually to Washington in this game, if only because it's a relatively large line. But as we've mentioned before, this isn't really a time of year where I am advising many bets. I'm not putting a single cent on any of these games. This is a time of year where we're feeling things out, trying to get a feel for which teams have pride, which teams are better than people expected out of the gate, which teams are worse, what's fluky and what's real. And that's why it's really hard for me to advise putting a chunk of change down on any of this stuff. I think, if anything, the Knicks would probably be the direction I'd lean. I think Miami they lack a certain star power, and New York has been playing well enough to sort of not go away. But anything can happen at the beginning of the year. Anything can happen. This is where we're just sort of waiting things out a little bit. No strong feelings there. In terms of the fantasy stuff, there's a whole lot of good things to to talk about going into an 11-game card. Your homework assignments are mixed in throughout. You don't really need to watch Dallas Atlanta. I wouldn't really want to force you to subject yourself to that, but I do want to see what happens with Wesley Matthews on the Dallas side. It seems like he's actually locked into a pretty big role this year. On the Atlanta side, Dwayne Dedmon expected to make his return very shortly, possibly even tonight. I think I did hear tonight, although I may be getting that wrong. So Alex Len, does he completely vanish? What's the minutes limit for Dedmon going into this ballgame? How far does he ramp up to? My guess would be 24 minutes is the target to try to keep him on the floor. So that's a guy we're going to be watching over the next couple of ball games. Brooklyn is a team we're always paying attention to. Can Jared Allen get it back going again after an off game? What's going on with the point guard rotations? What happens as Rondé Hollis-Jefferson gets healthy? Have you been able to sell Karis LeVert for a top 40 guy so far? I wish you could. I'm guessing most people are going to say no, but I would do it. Cleveland, what does it mean when they say they're going to the veterans? Is that going to impact Jetty Osman? Does that mean more George Hill? Because he's a guy we've been hanging on to who's off to an okay start to the year. We know he has a pretty awesome fantasy ceiling. He just hasn't seemed inclined to try to hit it. Can Kevin Love start to make some shots? Is J.R. Smith going to play? A lot of questions around Cleveland. That's a team I think we ought to pay very close attention to tonight, and they're on the short list here for homework assignments. The Knicks and the Heat. These teams bore me a little bit. I'm starting to get a pretty good feel, I think, for the Knicks. Looks like it's going to be Burke. It looks like it's going to be Cantor and Tim Hardaway Jr., but of course Mario Hezonja. Does he play? And as I said on, I think it was yesterday's podcast, if Hezonja plays 15 first-half minutes, I'm picking him up. Halfway through this game. I don't even need to see how he plays. If he's out there for 15 minutes in the first half, I'm picking him up because it means he's worked his way into Kevin Knox's minutes, and then we'll ride it for a month. For Miami, as people start to get healthy, I become more and more concerned about every single Heat I have on this team. I've basically advised a drop of everyone besides Josh Richardson and Hassan Whiteside. Goran Dragic as well. But we'll see how the minutes shake out and the touches as guys start to come back. They got just too many people, too many mouths on that team. Minnesota, Toronto, Danny Green, the last hurdle to jump. Greenwatch, 2K18. Can he survive the return of Delon Wright? I hope so, because Danny Green is looking like he might be. If he can survive this ball game, Danny Green could end up being one of the pickups of the year. I'm not kidding. He's been a top 30 guy in the past. He is on pace to be that guy. It's nuts. I can't believe I'm looking at my fantasy roster. I have a team sitting in front of me where I'm looking at it and I'm like, you know what? Danny Green could be a massive difference maker. He was a guy that got drafted in the 3rd round 3 years ago. What if he gets back anywhere near that and you picked him up off the waiver wire? That's a win you league kind of pickup. So let's hope. He's got one more hurdle to clear, and then Greenwatch 2K18 can become Green Enjoyment 2018. Utah, Houston, not interested in this ballgame from a fantasy perspective. Charlotte, Chicago, Justin Holiday is a guy we're watching. He's been off to a nice start, and now that Kris Dunn is out long-term, can Justin Holiday keep it going? I am not even the tiniest bit interested in those Chicago point guards. Charlotte, can they just play a nice, normal, competitive, high-scoring game? They could blow out Chicago in this one, which would be a real shame because this is an opportunity for guys like Marvin Williams to have a nice ball game. This is the perfect kind of opponent to just get out and run. Marvin slashing the hoop for a layup, wide open three-pointers, blocking some ill-advised shots. This is an old man kind of game, and I'm digging it. Chicago, man, they've disappointed me so far, but they're also wildly injured. No Kris Dunn for a long time. No Markkanen for a long time. That sucks. That's like last year all over again. Indiana, San Antonio. Can we see the Pacers starters play a normal 48-minute game without foul trouble or blowouts? Can we finally? Philly, Milwaukee, not all that interested in this ball game, actually. Memphis, Sacramento, the Grizzlies. It's Jaren Jackson Jr. is the watchman now with JaMychal Green out for a month. They turned their young guy loose a lot earlier than any of us really expected. We thought he'd be good down the line, but I'll admit I didn't think it was going to be this soon. Sacramento, same old thing. Look at the box score at the end of the night and see who played. Could be anybody. Lakers, Suns, not that interested on the Lakers side because we've got these suspensions looming right now. It does seem like Josh Hart is the man at that shooting guard spot, and he should be going forward. For Phoenix, you're going to start to see Trevor Ariza pop up on waiver wires if he puts up one more clunker. And so for that reason, sorry to those of you that still have him, I hope he puts up one more clunker because I'll scoop his ass up right quick. And then Washington, Golden State, still no Dwight Howard. So that's really the only thing at play in that ball game. And that's your show, ladies and gentlemen. Big Wednesday coming up at the end of the podcast. You know what happens. This is where I beg you to please subscribe to the show if you like what you've been enjoying so far. Subscribe to Fantasy NBA Today. It really means the world to us. It truly helps us reach new listeners. Follow myself at Dan Besbris, at Seth the Sportsman, at Hoopball Tweets, and at Hoopball Fantasy on Twitter. And go get a premium subscription, for goodness sake. You'll be happy you did. Live shows every night. Last night, you could have interacted with the great Eric Ong and the great Riaz Danani from 8 to 9 p.m. Pacific time. They were just sitting there waiting for you premium subscribers to send questions about your fantasy team to them, breaking down the nightly card. It's like we're light years ahead of the interactive tools of other websites out there, and that's what makes it so good. You can get it for $8 off with a $5 discount that's running right now and a $3 coupon code, which we've had floating out there for a long time. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to double check on this while we're finishing up the podcast. I'm pretty sure, although I'm not 100% certain, that, that's right, it was Sharich. Almost forgot. Seth and I had a coupon code out from our last show a month back. The coupon code is Sharich, S-A-R-I-C. We were enjoying the way that name is pronounced. So you can use that coupon code to get the $3 off on top of the $5 discount. Have a wonderful Wednesday, everybody. Again, hoping we'll wait and see on scheduling that we'll have Benny Aziz on the pod tomorrow. If not, we'll find somebody else that's just as awesome. Thanks again to Seth. We'll talk to you soon.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.